the complexities of family and stuff is really hard. But when you have like horrendous abuse and addiction all through it, it's hard enough to be a normal family, you know, and not have all that crap. But to have all that crap and drama and infighting and incest and, you know, just all of it, it just bubbled out. And I, like, you guys, it was not good. That's when I was like shopping like crazy. I started getting addicted to shopping, and, you know, I got a tan and got my hair blonde. And I don't know if I was trying not to be the person that I was when I got abused. I don't know, but I completely changed. I went on the medication. You know, I started, like, my husband at the time and stuff, we fought, and, like, you know, I just worked at the movie theater, and then at this point I was working at Kohl's, but I just became like just about me. Like, I was all about me. It was about me. And during this process of this, my husband, like I said, had got a job. Well, he wanted to move closer so he didn't have to drive the 45 minutes. Well, halfway through Rockford and Freeport is this town, Davis. And a guy that he worked with was selling his house, and it was a bi-level, and the house wasn't very old at all. The house was only a year and a half old. And so it was next to a park. It was in a small town. And so, again, I didn't know it was close to Lake Somerset, but we're like, he brings me out here. I'm like, I don't want to live out here in the middle of nowhere. Like, I just didn't. But he ends up buying the house, and I remember, you know, shopping for new bedding for them, because I have a weird thing about, I like new bedding on beds. I take showers at night because I like to be clean when I get in the bed, and I like new bedding, and I always made sure our kids had like a matching bedroom set. Why? I don't know. It was just something weird, probably from my abuse, that I liked. But so we move out here, and I hate it because I feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere. I absolutely hate it. And my mom ends up going back to Arizona, and my little sister, and I'm not even sure what, I think my sister Pauline may have moved somewhere else. I don't know actually where she went. Maybe in Texas. I mean, eventually she would go to South Carolina and North Carolina, but I was sort of like done with my family. I was done. I just wanted it to be about me, my husband, and my children. But it couldn't be, because I was still on this Prozac. And like I said, after my brother's death, you know, these things happened with my mom and all that. Then I get put on the Prozac, and I told you, I start off down here, but then I start to go like this, and then this is where normal is, where you should feel bad, but I go shoot past normal, and I'm way up here. Well, I'm on Prozac for a while, and at some point, while I'm on this Prozac, my mom comes back to visit, and so does my sister. And it's a short visit, but I actually see her this one time for a short visit. But after that, I would only see her 2 more times. And I remember her, because I just kept laughing at everything. And she said, man, whatever you're taking, I want some of it. Because I was just so happy all the time. Because I didn't feel bad about anything. And I didn't feel bad about things I should have felt bad about. You know what I mean? And again, like, by this time, my kids are in 1st grade, and I try to be the perfect mom, you guys. Like I said, you know, blonded my hair. I was tanning. I was thinner, like a normal then. We got them into T-ball. Like, I became the mom who came at lunchtime and would hang out with the kids at recess and played with the kids, and they all thought it was great. But I was also the mom who dressed provocatively, because, you know, I was, at the time that we moved out here, I was 24, you know, and a lot of the moms around me were older, but I was just 24. And so I just didn't fit in. I did not fit into this community at all. But I told you about my friend Rain. We had met her as we were painting the house and stuff, like the first week we were here. We hadn't even moved into the house. I think we were prepping it. She became my friend, and her kids were she had one a little bit younger, but one the same age as my girls. So they would go to the bus stop together. And after the bus stop and stuff, we would hang out together and talk. And she was a Christian, and she was absolutely lovely and kind to us. But and she would tell me, you're an unusual friend. You're not like any of my other friends. I still didn't fit in. Like, I just didn't fit in, and I knew I didn't fit in. And so I would spend a lot of time going back to Loves Park, my old stomping grounds. Well, my brother had gotten a job at this restaurant/bar, and when my mom and my sister had come up to visit, we had gone to this bar where my brother worked, my sister and I. And I remember I liked the way that it made me feel. Because remember, my mom used to drag us to the bar all the time when we were kids. And I just remember thinking, this is fun. Again, I was on Prozac. And so everything was fun. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. I like this. This is great. And then after they left, I decided, you know what? I think that was fun. I want to do that. So when my husband had gotten this job, he was working third shift. So what I started doing was, he would go to work, I would be a good mom during the day, and then on weekends and stuff, I would either bring my nieces over to my house, or I would take my kids to my brother's house, and then I would go to this bar. Started going to this bar and hanging out. Now, initially when I started, I wasn't drinking because I was on this Prozac. Well, eventually I went from not drinking to drinking. And I remember one time I was driving home, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's fog thick as pea soup. And we live out in the middle of nowhere. Seriously, it's nowhere. And I'm driving, and I remember sort of coming to and thinking to myself, maybe this isn't a good idea. And then immediately going right back into it. Like there was no rationale to my brain. Like where I had started off depressed, got normal, went past to euphoria. Like everything was about, woo, let's have a good time. That's what it was. And so even though during the day, I would make sure I would take my kids to the bus stop, I, became a room mom, would bring snacks, would go to school and, hang out at recess. We play Red Rover. The kids thought I was great. We put them in T-ball. Like I was all about being the mom during the day. But at night, when my husband would go to work on weekends, I would go out. And it was not good, you guys. Again, not good. Though I loved being a mom, and I loved just being around the kids. I loved knowing that I was never going to physically do the harm to them, like I was protecting them. It was all the things that I wanted when I was a kid, and I remember just going to lunch and stuff like that, and the kids thinking it was great, and playing t-ball with them, and having friends over, and we would have parties, and then we would go to the park, and I would push everybody around the merry-go-round because the park was right next to our house, and we would play, kick the can, and we would have Easter egg hunts with our friend Reen, and her husband would come over, at Thanksgiving or Easter, and we just, take the kids to Chuck E. Cheese. And like one Christmas, I didn't buy them 1 or 2 or 3, but I bought them 4 dolls for Christmas, and, decorated the house and just tried to do everything that I didn't have. But I was on this medication still. And during this time, their dad and I still not getting along at all. A lot of fighting, a lot of fighting. Sometimes it was physical. You know, there were doors that were punched. And, yeah, there was just always fighting. We just fought all the time. So I just was trying to escape, you know, escape the pain. And I'm not excusing my behavior because it's appalling, but it's what I did. You know, fight or flight. And that's what I did my entire life. And in the flighting, I always tried to ease the pain of whatever it was I was trying to escape. And, you know, I was trying to escape a bad marriage. I remember moving out and living with my friend who had been there when my brother died and helped get, you know, his grave and burial plot. And so, but yeah, during this time, guess what I did? Yeah, you guessed it. Had affairs. Had one before we moved out here. Had another one when I was going to the bar. Had another one going to the bar. My old boss from the movies, I ran into him at some point, let him kiss me. It was like kind of that thing. Either I slept with you or let you kiss me. It was sort of one or the other. And it was not good. And we had split up. Like I said, I had left and stuff like that. And we were pretty much thought it was done. It was over. And we end up reconciling. Well, when we reconcile, I don't stop the behavior. Don't stop the behavior. I'm still on the medication. Well, one day I'd taken the kids to my brother's and I had gone out. Well, I'd been gone all night and I was coming home just before I knew my husband got off work. Well, I was supposed to be at a job, like doing a phone job, I don't know, whatever, phone solicitor or whatever. But I quit it and he didn't know it. And so when I came home, he's waiting for me. And we start fighting. And he's so angry, he like rips my shirt right off my back. And he's like, "What's the matter with you?" And like just screaming at me. And he grabs the pills. And I'm freaking out because he took the pills and he flushed them down the toilet. And here's the thing. If someone's on medication for their brain, I don't care what they're acting like, you don't just shut them off, because what happens is, you know, the neurotransmitters and the chemical imbalance that will happen in a brain is awful. And this was pretty awful, you guys. He flushed them down the toilet. And I know I couldn't get more because the doctor's not going to prescribe you more because you just filled your prescription. And so I remember, like, when he did that, I sat, and this is a true story. I was talking to my friend Rain about it the other day. For 3 straight days, I stayed in bed. I just sat in bed, and I remember her coming over to check on me to see if I was okay. And I said, "I just want to die. Why won't God let me die? I just want to die. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this. Why won't he just let me die? Why won't he kill me?" And I just wanted to die, you guys. I just wanted to die. Because all that pain that had left me, you know, from my brother's death and everything, all of the decisions I had made while I was on this medication, all of the offense and the sin that I had committed, all came flooding back on top of me. I could feel everything and more. And it was pretty bad. I had to fight to live because I wanted to die so bad. And the only reason I didn't commit suicide is because I didn't want to do that to my kids. But I wanted God to take me. I mean, there were times I remember driving down the street, like, because we have like a 2-lane highway to get out to where we live. And I remember driving on it, and I would get impulses like, just drive off the side of the road, or just drive into that tree, or what would happen if you did this. And it was never about hurting someone else. It was always just like me. Like, how can I come up with a one car accident scenario? Just drive off the road right here. It's a bad curve. You'll flip over and die. Or just drive into that tree. And it was there, and it was constant. And so it was constant, you guys. It was not, oh my gosh. It was constant. Though I continued to try to be a good mom, my brain needed healing. You know, I was committed to my kids then, but there had been damage done. I mean, you know, they've seen their dad and I fight. They saw, you know, me leave, move out. They saw, you know, they saw the holes in the door or the wall. They saw it. They saw it all. They saw it. You know, they saw, and it's not my story to tell, but some of the stuff that he said to me and some of the stuff that he said to his kids was awful. I remember him calling me a stupid hick hillbilly and a fat cow. Like, whenever something went wrong, it was like always our fault. And I would tell people things it's my fault, and I think it's my fault. Like, everything was my fault. I remember one time I had accidentally set a hot pan on the counter, and he's like telling me I'm an idiot and just screaming at me. And then I remember one time I accidentally, cleaning the shower, had done something with the shower head and it broke, and again, just yelling at me. And that's what it just always was. That it was always how bad and stupid. Like, he poured into us everything that my children and I struggled with for decades. He poured the fuel on the fire of self-hate. And whenever anything good would happen in my life, you guys, I would self-destruct because I didn't feel worthy of it. And I didn't feel worthy. I remember when we moved into this house, I didn't feel worthy of being in that house. Or when we had gotten in a vehicle, I didn't feel worthy of driving that vehicle. I didn't know what it was like to drive a nice vehicle and live in a nice house. And it wasn't the best house in the world, but it was a nice house, you know? And I didn't know, like, I just remember feeling like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. Why is this happening? I don't deserve this. I'm just so bad. And it just fed it. It fed it. And no matter how hard, you know, because like and again, my shopping it never stopped. I had an addiction to shopping. It was pretty bad. Like, we had a tennis court near where we lived, and I bought my kids tennis courts, and whatever it was that was important to them was important to me. And, you know, I tried to live vicariously through them. And, you know, I remember when my daughter in 3rd grade, when I'm coming to school and like bringing them lunch, and she said, "Can you do me a favor and not come to school anymore?" And I remember being crushed, but I'm like, okay, if that's what you want. Because I just tried so hard to live through them. I mean, the first day of kindergarten, you guys, I had taken them to school, and I stood outside the door because I was so afraid of them, you know, something going wrong. And then the teacher asked me to leave, and then I went home and I sobbed my eyes out, and they were only gone half a day. Like, I had lived through them, and I had already instilled all the fear that I had of the world. I had already instilled that in them. Some of it was good, though, because I forgot to tell you about this. When we were living in my brother's house, because we had lived there for 2.5 years, someone tried to pick up my kids. They were riding a bike. It was a super long driveway. The house was set far back, kind of like my grandma's. And someone had pulled up at the end of the driveway and was like trying to get them to come there. They dropped their bikes, ran in the house. I think it was my oldest daughter dropped her bike, ran in the house, and was like, Mom, they're trying to, like, they knew, because I had taught them from a young age about, you know, stranger danger. And so they just had me, like, just my life be consumed by them, because I didn't know what my identity was, and I was trying to find it, you know? And so, well, around this time, after the, my medication was flushed and stuff like that, after my brain sort of normalized as much as it could, my mom had called, and this is like almost 2 years, I'm lying, almost 3 years after my brother had died. She called to say, like, I'm dying, and if you want to see me, you should probably come see me. So we all packed the kids up and we went to Arizona. And my husband at the time still had friends there that we also went to see. His friend from when my girls were born. She was like a head honcho now. And a couple of other friends that he had hung out with. We went back to see them and stuff like that. And my mom was still in that same small trailer, and I told you about cockroaches in Arizona. I don't care if you live in a palace, you can't get away from them. So I remember going there, and it was just so tiny, and she was so sick, and she, at this point, like, had a nebulizer, and she was on oxygen, and she was basically bedridden. She could get up a little bit in a wheelchair, and you could push her around, and I think we had maybe even taken her to the Salvation Army at this point. And but I remember she had got up to go to the bathroom because she could walk a little bit. Well, I had sat down in her wheelchair, and, like, I suddenly feel the wheelchair lunge forward, and I thought she was falling. And I was like, and she was kidding, like, trying to joke with me, and I sobbed hysterically. And I'm like, you scared me. And she's like, I was just kidding. And she could barely talk, but what had happened was we had spent, I couldn't handle, like, seeing the cockroaches and stuff, and I was just like, I was so sad that my mom was living in these conditions, but I knew there was nothing I could do about it. Now, my sister Judy was there, and like I said, my husband at the time had a good friend who was she was a head honcho of this hotel chain, or this hotel, and she had gotten us a room to stay there. So she comped us some rooms, and we were able to stay at this hotel, nice hotel, and we sort of hung out there and hung out with his friends and, like, had a really good time, that part of it. And then I would go see my mom and go back. Well, my brother and his family had come with us too. We sort of convoyed down here, just his van and our Jeep convoyed down here. And I will tell you this is a little side note, a little funny. Okay, our Jeep, even though it was a newer Jeep, it started overheating when we got in Arizona, so you had to, like, turn the heater on in order to get it to not overheat. Well, I could feel myself sort of getting sick at one point, and I'm like, I got to get an air conditioning. So we had pulled over at this, I think it was a Hardee's, okay? This was this was around the time there was a three-peat. And if you are from Chicago or Illinois or Arizona, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. There was a three-peat, and we had just beat the Suns in Phoenix Suns in a basketball championship. Okay, so we had our three-peat shirts on, Bulls three-peat. Well, we get out of the car to go into this air conditioning thing. And someone coming out, they said, hey, wearing that shirt here will get you shot. You're in the wrong place. Yeah. So I don't know if we wore those again. But anyway, we sort of, we had a good time hanging out. She had comped us a couple rooms, and it had an opening door, and we got to see old friends and stuff like that. That was kind of nice. But when I would go back to my mom's, there was always this weird sort of guilt trip, even from my brother Paul, which was rare. But, like, even he's like, yeah, what, are you too good to come to my house or something like that? And I was like, no, she comped at these rooms. We're not trying to bug anybody. And I remember it was inevitable. My oldest sister, Judy, and it was me and my brother, Norm, and we sort of had each other's backs because my brother had pulled himself out of where we came from. He owned a lot of property. He had nice homes. You know, he had a good job. And my husband, we had a decent house, a nice house. And, you know, he had a good job. And so, you know, we were dressed nice when we went down there, whatever. And I remember my sister Judy, she starts laying on this guilt trip. Laying on the guilt trip. And I don't know what came over me. And I had it. And I turned, and my brother is standing right there, my brother Norm too. And I said, I was like, I go, wait a minute, no. And I said, you are not going to make us feel guilty because of your choices. You chose this life, we didn't. I don't spend my money on drugs. I don't smoke pot. Like, I don't spend all my money on stuff that like that. So you can't make us feel guilty for your choices, and we're not going to do it. You're not going to make us feel bad because for our lives. You're not. And I mean, it was a bad fight. And unfortunately, the fight happened in front of my mom. And I say that because the fight's going to come up again later. But it was not a good scene. It never is. I don't know. We got to see friends, and I got to see my nephew and stuff like that. So and my great nephew. So that part was great, but the rest of it was awful. I remember feeling so sad about my mom and the condition she was living in, but there was nothing I could do to help her. And so, this is what they chose. And so, we leave that visit, and this is in the summer. This is in the summer of 93. So at this point, I'm not quite 27. I'm still 26. And we come back. Well, on our way home, and this is a true story, my brother actually saved our lives. Remember, I said we had convoyed together in 2 different vehicles driving down there. Well, we had these walkie-talkies. And there's a stretch of road, it's called 88 up here in Illinois, and we drove straight through. That's what we did. Whether you could make it in as soon as 28 hours, you know, but the average was 32. But if you really sped and watched your stops, you could make it home in 28 hours. So you're driving straight through. Well, we, of course, drove straight through because we just wanted to get home. And because at that time, we weren't even sure we were going to be able to go see my mom because the flood had happened and all of the bridges were being closed. There was only one bridge open between Illinois and Missouri. It was one bridge that was open. All the rest of them had been closed because the flooding was so bad that year. But anyway, we're driving home and we're on 88. And it's a really nice highway, but it's blacktop. So, and there's no lights around, and it sort of can lull you because it's so nice and so smooth. Well, we were driving, and we're in front, and I can tell 88's about an hour from where we live. So had been driving for a long time, and we were just trying to get home. Well, I have a habit of trying, even when my husband would drive the semi, I would stay awake and try to watch him. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I would drive him nuts. Well, I was kind of doing that, but I was getting tired. And it's my husband and I, and we fall asleep behind the wheel. And my brother is behind us following us. And apparently, when we had fallen asleep, we start crossing and we're heading toward the median. Because it's 2 lanes this way and 2 lanes the opposite way, and a big sort of median that dips a little bit in the middle. And my brother grabs the walkie-talkie and he said, "Are you guys okay in there?" And because we heard his voice, it wakes us up. And he grabs a wheel and we pull over, and we're like this at this point. You know, which reminds me, because see, this is probably why also I'm really paranoid. I'm going to take a real quick side note, because we ended up driving back home. You know, this is in the summer of 93. Because also when we had gone down to Arizona that summer, they had a heat wave. It was 120 degrees. So we had survived the floods here, and we went down into one of the worst heat waves they had in a long time. So it was And even when I lived there in 1980, when I was pregnant with my son, they had floods down there. So I don't know. Talk about being paranoid and feeling like destruction follows you. It took me a long time to like get over that. But anyway, and start seeing the positive instead of the negative, which I'm pretty good at. But one time when, remember I said we had lived in the 3 apartments, the second apartment we had lived in when we were in Arizona, we had a neighbor who was ended up becoming a friend. She also did drugs too. But I was babysitting her kids one day, and we were driving somewhere. And when we were driving, it was like a 1970 Grand Torino or something. So it had a really big front end and a small back end. But we were driving on the freeway in Arizona, and the tire blew. Well, what I didn't know at the time, because I was so young, you don't tap the brakes on it when a tire blows. You just let off the gas. Well, I had tapped the brakes. When I tapped the brakes, it locked the brakes up. And the car literally, we're driving, and it goes, and it just starts spinning. And it spins this way, and I like correct it, so it starts doing this. It fishtails to the left, it fishtails to the right, fishtails to the left, fishtails to the right, fishtails, fish, until it straightens itself out. So we're doing this. And the first time we had done it, we had literally turned sideways, because I remember turning, and I'm looking, and I can see a cement truck's coming right at us. And there's nothing I can do. I'm just trying to like correct the car to get it to go straight. But it was like sideways, and I turned the wheel, and which made it skid back the other way, and it just kept doing it until eventually it went straight, and then we pulled off the side of the road, and I was hysterical. And their mom happened to have drove by because she was going to go to work or something, saw us, and that's how we ended up getting help. But I remembered them putting their hands on the dashboard, both of them, and my kids, and those 2 kids were in the car. Yeah, it was. So the fact that triggered a memory of that, because, yeah, here with, had my brother not said, had we not had those walkie-talkies, I don't know that any of us would have survived that day. So, you know what I'm saying? That's why I like to stay home. So, I mean, seriously. And I already told you guys in number 8 about all the deaths that had been occurring. Different people pass away through the years. So I've always had like, with cars. But anyway, so we make it back home after my brother, saved us. And so, well, the Lord saved us. I don't want to but he used my brother. So we get home, and then this is the summer of 93. Well, we get the phone call in February of 94. And my sister says, Mom's like within days of dying, and she wants to come home. She wants 3 things she wanted. She wanted to die in my grandmother's house. She didn't want to die alone. And she didn't want to die in the dark. She wanted to die with the light on. So I have to go pick up my mom and my sister Judy at the airport in Chicago. Well, this particular day, there was a severe snowstorm. And so thankfully it was a white Dodge Caravan, all-wheel Dodge Caravan. And I very slowly made it to my brother's, who lived about 20 minutes from me. And he drove us into Chicago, O'Hare, to get my mom and sister. And so get my mom and sisters, and we bring my mom back to my grandmother's. And my grandmother is there at the time. She also has emphysema, so she has oxygen. But my child molesting uncle is also there, staying at this house at the time. And so, obviously, for obvious reasons, my children are not allowed over there. Obviously, my kids were not going to be around. So what I would do is every day I would get up and I would drive into town and stay all day and then drive home, because I lived about 30 minutes, 35 minutes from where my grandmother lived. So I would drive into town, see her, spend the day with my mom, and then drive back. It had been decided at least we needed to get her on some kind of financial aid so that she could get her medication or hospice and different things like that. So I was busy trying to get all of that stuff done in the middle of all this, spending time with her. And again, she didn't want to be left alone, so we never left her alone. When you left the room, you had to have somebody in the room. We would always keep the light on. And so this just sort of went on. Well, after several days, we realized that my mom was hanging on because she wanted to say goodbye to my sister Pauline. She hadn't seen her. My little sister Lorraine was in jail at this time, so she had said goodbye to everybody she could before she came up here, like my brother Paul. But up here, she was able to say goodbye to me and say goodbye to my brother Norm, but the only person left at this point was Pauline, who she wasn't able to see, who was in Texas, I believe, at that time, so I flew her up here. You know, we paid for it, and I remember there being a little bit of a grift because, you know, my brother didn't want to see me getting used, and which was fair. You know, he's like, I don't want to see them using you and stuff like that, because I was easily manipulated. I was. You could guilt me and shame me so easily. Ugh. And they would through the years. But anyway, so we get my sister and we bring her up here. And when she gets here, my mom would die within 7 hours of her getting here. But in the midst of this, it was 6 days from the day that I had picked her up to the day that she died. It was like February 6th to February 12th or something like that. 6 days. But I want to tell you what happened during those 6 days. Because like I said, we flew my sister up and within 7 hours, because me and my older sister had driven back to my house so that she could get some rest and stuff. But this is what happened in the span of those 6 days. Okay. First off, the stress of like trying to figure out what we're supposed to do with my mom. At some point, I get in a fight with my sister Judy. We're in the bathroom, and she's screaming at me, telling me that my mom never forgave me for the fight that we had gotten into in Arizona, because I had yelled at Judy, because nobody yelled at Judy, because she was the oldest and the favorite for everybody. And she's like, Mom never forgave you for that fight. Like literally, my mom's dying in the other room, and this is what she's saying to me, trying to shame and guilt me. And I remember my grandmother coming in here, and she like coming in there, and she shamed us both, man. She's like, I can't believe you're doing this when your mother's in there dying. Shame on you. And so, because I tried really hard to honor my grandmother, despite of the strain that I felt with her. I didn't want to disrespect her, because she never, you know, overtly ever did anything to me, though I do think that she enabled her son to hurt all these people. But apart from that, she never, like, outrightly did something, but I always felt distant from her and not liked by her. And so, and I say all that to say this, because my uncle's there. My brain is sort of at this point. But I remember my cousin Wanda, coming over and getting me. She took me out for breakfast, and she was lovely and kind. She always has been. Always has been. She's always been wonderful. I love her very much. Yeah. And she knew what it felt like, because she's lost siblings, you know? And so, and I loved her very much. And she had lost her dad at this point. And I also forgot, remember when I said when my brother had passed away, that was when, right after he had passed away, my husband's nephew had passed away, our next door neighbor passed away, my stepdad Lee had passed away, and Wanda's dad had passed away, in 5 people in 4 months. That also happened Remember when I said I was like coming unglued and losing my mind? So my brother dies. My stepdad dies. Our next door neighbor dies. My husband's nephew dies. And my cousin Wanda's dad dies in 5 months. And I find out about the picture with my mom, or with my kids and my uncle. And on top of dealing with my, brother's death and like losing my mind, all of that had a lot to do with getting put on Prozac too. Like all of that fed the chaos that was in my mind. So all that happened at that time too. But I want to tell you what happened during these 6 days. I got in a fight with my sister, and I'm not sure what started it, but she just laid it on big time and said that my mom was never forgave me for getting in a fight with her when we had gone to visit her a few months prior in Arizona. And she said, she just kept saying my mom never forgave you, and like was yelling at me. And I said, you were just trying to make us feel guilty, just like you are now. Like you're always trying to make us feel guilty, and I'm sick of it. And my grandmother had come in, and she was very upset because we were yelling. And she was like, she shamed us, and she said, I can't believe you're doing this in front of you, like with your mom in the other room dying. Shame on you. And she like shamed us. And so from that point forward, I tried really hard just to keep my mouth shut and just take care of my mom and do what I'm supposed to do. Well, one day, and I remember, my aunts and cousins coming, and like I said, my cousin Wanda, the aunts that were around came, and my cousin Wanda was amazing. She had come over and took me to breakfast, and she was just always lovely and supportive to me. She always has been. And she knew what it was like because she had lost siblings and she had lost her dad. And so she knew, she knew what it was like. And I love her very much. Actually, I love her very much. She's a pretty special lady. But one day, I don't know, I just remember like Junior was making soup beans or something, and I remember people joking about Junior's soup beans and stuff, and I just remember feeling sick to my stomach, like the thought of eating something he made, and just sick to my stomach. I hated him so much. And so one day, and I had already gotten in a fight with my sister, so I'm like trying to keep my cool and trying to keep my mouth shut because I don't want my grandmother to kick us out and forbid us from coming to see my mom. And like I said, I would come in the morning, stay all day, and whatever needed to be done. Like I remember buying pillows, and I would go get her medication. I remember trying to get her on hospice and trying to get her financial aid and all that stuff. I remember trying to do all that. All in 6 days, you guys, because she died 6 days after she got here. So it was like, I had put 1,000 miles on my van in 1 week. Like, that's how much driving I was doing. And so, after getting a fight with my sister and stuff, I try to keep my cool and just keep my mouth shut and sort of just do my thing. And at this point, I had started flirting with Jesus. Our friend had taken us, that same summer that we went to see my mom, our friend had taken us to that Christian concert. So I'd been exposed to Christian stuff, and I'd been exposed to Christian music. And Stephen Curtis Chapman, The Great Adventure, I think was the cassette. I would play that all the time. And it might have been the album before that, I'm not sure. But so I was listening to Christian music, and at this point flirting with Jesus. Well, one day I went to leave. I believe I was going home. I believe it was like I was heading home, and I make it to the door, and I hear, I love her too. And it's my uncle's voice, and he's sitting on the couch, and what I want to say is, yeah, we know how you love. But I don't. Out of respect for my grandmother, I say, yeah, I know you do. And that's it. Like I'm getting ready to leave. And he says, "Can I have a hug?" This man who molested all of us. This man who tried to lock me in the apartment, if you remember, with my mom. This man who had raped family members. This filthy, disgusting, sick, twisted bastard of a man was asking me for a hug. Because I don't want to upset my grandmother again, because we had gotten in a fight, my sister and I turn around and I go like this. And I nod my head slightly. And he gets up. Because my grandmother, I think, was in the kitchen. And he gets up and I had my arms down to my sides. And he gets up and he hugs me. And as soon as he touches me, you guys, he puts his arms around me to hug me. I go like this with my elbows. Like I knock my elbows out. And he goes like this. Like his hands immediately go up. And I spin around and I walk out the door. And as I'm walking out the door, my grandmother had, like I said, a long driveway. And I start sobbing. I mean, hysterical. Like vomit sobbing. Like heaving, hysterical sobbing. And I make it to my Jeep and I start driving home. And I mean, like I can barely see because I'm crying so hard and I'm sobbing hysterically. But I realize something is happening through the sobs. I realize this. My uncle had to ask permission from me to touch me. And he had to let go when I said to let go. And somehow or another, in that weird sort of thing, God had given me freedom. Because now I had the power. I had my power back. I was no longer a victim. I was the one in control. And you guys, I don't know how, but in the process of my mind, in that 35-minute drive home, I was able to cut my own shackles off of me. Because I knew that I was shackled to him as long as the resentment and bitterness lived in me. He had control. And that day, he lost all control over me. I was no longer going to waste all of my time and energy daydreaming about how he could be tortured. I hated him that much. I did it. And I thought, he's not worth me doing that anymore. And I wasn't going to do it. I chose to set myself free that day. And I don't know how God did it. I can't even tell you the moment. I just know in the process of going home, I realized God had given me my power back and I had control. He was no longer a threat. He couldn't hurt me anymore. And I found freedom from him that day. It doesn't mean that I still don't think that what he did was sick and twisted. And I hate everything that he stood for. And it would be tested again later. Trust me, this is not the end of the story. But I knew that I had my power back and I was in control. And that he would no longer have control over me, my thoughts, or my feelings anymore. True story. So, with that, days, again, I don't know if it was the next day or a couple days later, but it was 3 days before my mom died. Somehow or another, she had asked, because she could talk, but she could barely talk. She would whisper. That's how she talked. You would have to bend down and listen to her. But she had asked for a pastor. And my sister Judy, which is weird because we had gotten in that fight, mind you. This is what I mean. I don't know. We had gotten in the fight, had asked for a pastor. So we went. There was a church up the street. So me and my sister Judy went to this pastor. And I remember my sister in this moment, as we're talking to this pastor, asking him to come to my mom, her looking at me and saying, if you want, I'll ask Jesus into my heart right now if you want, like asking me that. And I'm like, that's not my decision. That's your decision. You know, because I felt like, again, she was trying to put something on me and make it my responsibility for her. And I hated that feeling because it was just perpetuated in our family. Like my child molesting uncle saying, you liked it, didn't you? It was always putting it off on somebody else. And I just didn't want the responsibility of whether my sister got saved or not. That was her choice. And I'm like, that's between you and God. That's not up to me. Like me, I think at this point I had received Jesus as my Savior, but he wasn't Lord. I was still figuring it out. Well, the pastor had come back to my grandmother's, and you know what's funny? I just realized something. This is going to be a side note for a minute. This actually, when we lived at my grandmother's house, there was a pastor that went door to door. And I was dating a guy who was a professing former Satan worshiper, and he had bought me a coat for Christmas. And when that pastor come, I'm like, hey, can I ask you a question? And I had asked him about dating this guy, and he said, you know, like he gave me advice, and I ended up breaking up with him, but I got rid of that coat because of it, because I never felt comfortable wearing that coat. But I think this might have been the same pastor, you guys. I just realized that just now. Anyway, this Baptist pastor up the street, whatever, comes to my mom's, and it's me, my mom, and him in the room. And I said, you know, I'm like, Mom, because I knew the gospel. You know, I'm like, you know, you can ask Jesus into your heart to forgive you for your sins, and you won't have to hurt. You know, you'll be able to go to heaven, Mom, you know, and there will be no more pain there, no more tears, and no more hurt. Do you want this? And she nodded. And so the pastor and I led her through, you know, the salvation prayer. And when she's done, she motions for me to come down, and I bend down, and I because when she was done, I go, it's okay, Mom, you can go home now. You don't have to hurt anymore. You don't have to stay here. You can go home. And I bent down, and I was listening, because she motioned for me to come down, and I listened really carefully. And she said, I'm sorry. I was 27 and a half years old. And she said, I'm sorry. I told her, it's okay, Mom, I forgive you. It's under the blood of Jesus. You can go home now, it's okay. And I remember walking out of that room, and I'm crying, and I'm like, it's okay now, it's okay, because she received Jesus as her Savior. It's okay, it's okay. And everybody was looking at me like I was a nut job, but I knew it was going to be okay. Well, 3 days later, at that point, we knew that we had to fly my sister in. I don't know if my mom requested it or what, but we fly my sister in. And like I said, she stayed with my mom because I knew I'd been there through the whole thing, but I knew that my job was done somehow because my mom had gotten saved, and that was the point. I don't know. I don't know how I knew that. I don't know. I just knew like I didn't want to be there when she left the world. I just didn't. I knew I couldn't handle it. And so my sister and I had left to go to my house, like I said, my older sister, because we needed a break. And so we left, and not much longer after we had gotten to our house, we got the phone call that my mom was gone, and we drove back. And I remember taking the kids, because my brother had come over, and, you know, everybody was coming over, and I had taken all the kids and ushered them into the bedroom because I didn't want them to see them take my mom out, and I didn't want to see them take my mom out. And so again, we didn't have money, you know, like the money that it was going to cost to bury her. So she ended up getting basically a pine box covered in felt, because that's what we could afford, because it was thousands of dollars to have a funeral, and we didn't have it, you know. Even though everybody was fine, every ounce of money they made went back into what they owed on, whether it be their house, their vehicle, or whatever. Nobody had extra money laying around. So my mom has a graveside funeral, and she has it again at the cemetery that my sister Joanna's buried in, my brother's buried in, my cousin at this point. At this point, I still think it's only one of my cousins, because eventually it would be two. A brother and sister, like I told you, would die. But again, we didn't have anywhere, we didn't have the money for the funeral, so my friend calls that church. They end up donating the plot next to my brother, and that's where my mom was buried. And my friends Bill and Shirley donate the headstone, and my brother Norm and I split the cost of the vault, and that's how my mom got buried. And so my mom was buried next to her son, my brother. Graveside service. Yeah. And I can't remember who paid for the casket. It wasn't much of a casket. Can't remember if we got our financial aid at that point or what, but yeah. So my mom and my brother are buried next to each other, like not far from where my sister Joanne is buried, which my mom and brother are also not buried not far from where my two cousins, both my younger cousin that were siblings that lost their lives in accidents, one in a car accident, the other one being hit by a car. They're all in that same cemetery, and which later would be the place that my present husband and I, co-workers, little boy would be buried. Yeah. True story. I think I'm going to stop there. I think I'm going to stop there. Because, yeah, I'm going to stop there because things change again. Yeah. I don't know if you struggle with forgiveness or not. I really don't. It's a hard thing. But so is hypocrisy. I may not have been guilty of the same things that my uncle was guilty of, but I was guilty of my own sin. And I had to come to the realization, you guys, just like with my mom, that Jesus had died for them too. Jesus' blood covered their sin the same as it covered mine. I'm going to see my mom again someday, no matter what she did to me or my siblings or didn't do. I'm going to see her again someday because she received Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior 3 days before she died. I don't know if I'm going to see my uncle again. I don't know if he received Jesus as his Lord and Savior. I don't know. To be quite honest with you, I don't care. Not because that makes me a heartless or cold person, but because God understands the pain of what he did to us. So I'm not going to feel the same as other people might feel toward him. They might care. I just simply don't. But if he does, I know, and it was hard. I had to talk to my siblings about that, especially my two sisters, like helping them understand, the ones who got abused most by him, to tell them, you know, Jesus died for him too. And those are hard conversations to have with people. They're like, yeah, but. I'm like, yeah, but look at my sin. You know, I was guilty of infidelity. more than once. I was a thief. I was a liar. I didn't do what he did, but I had my own sin. And guess what? The ground's level at the cross. There are no first place sinners. We're all sinners. Scripture says all have fallen short of the glory of God. We're all sinners. Was it easy to understand that I had to get a place of forgiveness that really binds me and not the person that I'm not forgiving? Did you know that? That forgiveness is the key of the shackle, you guys. As long as I kept bitterness toward my uncle, he had power over me. But the second I chose to forgive him, he had no power over me anymore. Nothing he did or said had power over me anymore. I didn't care. None of it mattered because I was in control of how I felt now. He wasn't in control. He wasn't able to affect or influence me in any way, shape, or form. You guys, it was pretty bad. I had daydreams about how to torture him. I hated him that much. I thought about, like, you know, tying him to a tree and pouring honey over him over a red anthill and just watching him be tortured. Like, those are the kinds of thoughts that would come to my mind. After that day, they didn't come to my mind anymore because I learned to forgive him. And there's going to come a time where it's going to come back around, you guys, and you'll hear that story later about how it finally ended for him, where he was not able to hurt anybody again. And if you're asking me, wondering why didn't somebody turn him in, I don't know. But I will tell you that throughout my life, there have been several times that I've tried to do the right thing and turn people in for different things. Like my husband at the time when we had first moved here, when he had that second job, they were illegally dumping chemicals in the back of the business. Well, I knew there was well water around there, so I called the EPA. Nothing happened. There will be another time where there's a child molester in the town of Davis. He was a child molester. He had molested somebody we knew. And there was a mom letting her kid hang out there, and I went to her and I brought her to my house and begged her to not let her daughter go over there. And she didn't listen, and her daughter got molested. And there'll be another person that I go to and I try to stop them from letting their kid around Junior. And they didn't listen either. So just like my sister had tried to tell when she was little, there were times we tried to tell and nobody would listen to us. But you want to know who was watching? God was watching. And it would come to an end. And you'll hear that later. But as far as everybody else, I also want you to understand something. I thought everybody knew what was happening. My whole life, I thought everybody knew and did nothing. Well, I found out as an adult when one of my cousins died after the funeral. I had a conversation with another cousin, and I found out they didn't. Not everybody knew. Some knew. Many knew, but not everybody. Because they were spared. And I know there are people out there who are going to say, but how? How do you do it? Well, it's a choice. It's a choice every day to get up and say, I choose to forgive those who have sinned against me so that I might be forgiven for the sin that I have sinned against God and others. Because Scripture tells us in order to be forgiven, we have to forgive first. And I want to be forgiven. You know, my mom, she said she was sorry, and I forgave her. In that moment, I forgave her for everything that she did. Because there was a time where I would say, you know, my mom did the best she could. And then when that time I told you when I was away from her for a year and we had moved back to Illinois, I'm like, she did not do the best she could. She was a horrible mother. But then, after she died, I can honestly say she did the best she knew how. She could only do what she knew, and what she knew was complete and utter dysfunction. Her behavior was out of pain and sorrow and fear and hurt and anger and frustration. I have to tell you, when I gave my testimony years later, I said I had 5 best friends. You want to know what they were? Fear, hurt, anger, guilt, and shame. Those were my 5 best friends. Fear, guilt, hurt, anger, and shame. And they hung out with feelings of unworthy, unwanted, unneeded, unnecessary. All those uns come up to fear, guilt, hurt, shame, and anger and tell you you're not worth it. It's not worth it. He's not worth it. They're not worth it. The right thing isn't worth it. Stay in your place of anger, hurt. It's better to stay here than to be challenged to do better, to make different choices, better choices. Challenge yourself. I encourage you. Search your heart. There's still people I wrestle with forgiving, and there's days they're forgiven, and then the next day I pick that thing back up and I just start using it against them, and I have to choose to forgive them again, because I'm reminded, especially doing these videos, of what a shitty person I am and what I need forgiveness for. So if I want people to forgive me, I have no choice but to forgive. And the thing is that's where hypocrisy comes in, because a lot of people can't see what they've done wrong. They can't see their own flaws and their own wrongdoing, especially in today's world. You know, it's really easy for people to stand on their soapbox or pick up stones and throw them at other people and say, you did this or you did that, but they don't see what they have done. I'm confessing in these videos everything I've done, you guys, because I see what I've done. In order to forgive those around me, I had to see the wrong that I did first, so that I could forgive those around me, because I wanted forgiveness. And there would be a big challenge in this coming up, and you guys will hear about that in the next one. Big challenge about forgiveness, about seeking it, about needing it, about giving it. So with that, I hope this helps you. I'm going to let you go. And we'll talk more about that later. But I really want to encourage you and challenge you to search your heart. Who do you need to forgive? And what do you need to ask for forgiveness for? Because they go hand in hand. Because when my mom said, she said, I'm sorry, I said, it's okay, I forgive you. And I said sorry to her back. Because I walked away from my mom more than once. I didn't see her as of value. I didn't see her value. I just thought she was a selfish, cruel lady. But my mom had value. There are times I miss her now. I just miss having a mom. I made a lot of poor choices when my kids were young. If they don't forgive me, I couldn't bear that. So I have no choice but to forgive those around me who've offended me, because I've offended so many myself. Forgiveness is a key to taking off the shackle. It's freedom. It's a choice you make. They're not off God's hook. Just take them off your hook so that you can be free to walk away and not carry that thing anymore. I love you guys. I hope you'll consider what I had to say. I hope what I say makes sense. And I'll see you next time. Melinda out.